Good morning. And the great solemnity of Peter and Paul. There's no feast day just for Paul, none for just St. Peter, but together. I must say, I was greatly heartened to see Pope Leo, the new Pope, using this opportunity this week on the same feast day to reach out with sincere love and what I it comes across to me as an intensely palpable spiritual leadership to see him in communion with Bartholomew, Greek patriarch, to see him in communion with the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, who I've been privileged to stand beside in Ukraine myself with the leaders of that church, and to see the beauty and the desire for a universal love that transcends politics or national boundaries. National boundaries, they come and go, right? Brest is in Poland and it's not in Poland. And, then I get a book from a graduating chief resident about Pinsk. And then, it's here, it's there. And who can say, uh, you know, uh, 800 years ago, because I hadn't realized I had recruited a bunch of Tartars, Russian Tartars, into the training program. And one minute you're on top as the leading marauding, conquering nation. Next minute you're persecuted. Who knows where we all end up? Surprises, surprises. They come all shapes and sizes. You never know what's round the bend. It might delight, it might offend. That's why they're surprises. Okay. You come out topper, come full stop. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? So Thomas the Tank Engine was quite the philosopher. Okay. You have as many children as I do. There it is. And so first a minute on Peter and Paul, then the gospel reading, and then an examination of what is the epistle reading in Romans today. So Peter focuses his mission primarily on the Jews, and Paul's the apostle to the Gentiles. But I've in Peter and Paul, I've always wondered why the people who put our Bible together, why Saint Athanasius and friends, I just we should just not think that things ended up there in canonicals by random. And so people looking through after the first 3 centuries of Christianity, Constantine converts and he's looking for a recommendation from his scholars. What's going to become the canonical Bible for the state religion that for at least the next 300 years until the rise of Islam is the only game in town, Pax Romana, and is going to be a blueprint. I'm looking at constructing actually my own mausoleum these days and seeing if that's accepted. And, I don't think I'm going to put anything in there that's random. And so why did they choose to put in a public disagreement? It's in Acts and it's in Galatians. Peter and Paul are characterized by fighting. Why is it that in the canonical Bible, we have multiple documents, one written, as we suppose, by Luke, whoever that is. I never think it's really one person, by the way. I always think it's a group, and they just, writing on behalf of the gospel committee is Luke, the dear and glorious physician, but it's also in Galatians. And why document fighting and saying, I called out Cephas in public. I rebuked him. I opposed him to his face. That he's eating falafel, hummus, and matzah with the Jews, but he's having bacon cheeseburgers with the Gentiles. For fear of the hypocrisy. Paul publicly rebukes him for his hypocrisy and not living consistently with the truth of the gospel. So we're going to talk about that when we're done, but I'll give you my own hypothesis. Now, if you teach statistics, as I do sometimes, the null hypothesis means you start out with, my intervention will make no difference. The null hypothesis. So the null hypothesis here is, this is completely random and means nothing. But let's disprove that. And the disproof is, it's there twice. The disproof of that, rejecting the null hypothesis, is I think that the people who originated our Gospels and our Bible wanted people to see that it wasn't amongst leaders of churches you should expect to have controversy. And then later, Peter still says, my dear and glorious brother, to Paul, after he slaps him in letters and in Acts. And I think that's the point. The point of this is not the heightened speech of that group hates America and that group hates America. No, that's not what we're supposed to be. We love, but we love in different ways, with different estimations of what is valuable at the time. Whatever the burning issue of the day is, the eradication of Medicaid, the gutting of healthcare research. Half the people in my HIV program are going to be fired the next month because of a cut in funding. The people who do outreach, the people who make sure that shut-ins and people with mental health and substance issues get to their doctors. And that has been defunded. And I can't intervene because it's national. I could do something at the state, but the state's going to lose those millions and it's going to kill somebody. So it's not the sort of heightened, they hate. I don't think they hate people. I think they just have a different concept of what is the good. You know, our bro Plato Socrates, there is no ideal form of evil. There's deprivation of the good. I think they're deprived of the good. Deprivation of the good. It's like ischemic heart disease or a stroke or peripheral arterial disease, deprived of the good. And so Peter and Paul had disagreements about, is the early church, or Jesus was a Jewish leader, or Jesus is a world leader. Okay. Our beloved brother Paul, and acknowledged the divine wisdom in Paul's writing. So this wider mission of two men, two humans who were willing to sacrifice their bodies, to die, to suffer for Christ. And not the suffering that we think of, like, my God, like that church uptown is so far from Brooklyn. Oh my God, how can I get up there? This is so difficult. I'm suffering for Christ, because I have to ride the subway for an hour. I'm suffering, and there's all those homeless people there, and they smell in the morning. I'm suffering for Christ. Not our sort of middle class suffering. Uh, but what else do they have in common besides the love and service of Christ? So the Acts and Galatians documents their public fight, but it also documents their public unity. Imagine that they had not met for years, and then a space of 15 years, and we're talking about at a time when the life expectancy is 50, to not meet for a decade and still be connected. You know, that's a real connect. That's the invisible, eternal, universal, spiritual connection. I think the other thing why Peter and Paul are together is because of their failings, their weaknesses. That's why I think they're so prominent, because if you think through which disciples, apostles are the most robust and filled out, they're the ones who screwed up. The guys that did the good thing and did right, and even Thomas, right? What's his biggest thing? That he screwed up and doubted. But then he goes all the way and starts churches for millions of people out in India and South Asia. We know Judas because he betrays Christ. I'm not so sure that Judas actually wasn't Christ's best bro, because he had to be the guy that was willing to spend. Jesus Christ Superstar is. My father thought that it was a very tacky. He said, that's the end of Christianity, that musical. And I said, 10-year-old, when I first heard it, I go, no, I don't think it that way. I think that Judas is the guy that has to say, everybody for the rest of eternity is going to think I'm an asshole, or whatever the Greek word for asshole is. And so they're characterized, Peter and Paul, by their weaknesses. Peter denies Christ. Paul is violent to Christians. Peter is violent to the temple guards and chops off ears for his own teacher, who said, don't be violent. And then what does he do? The day before the boss is going to get killed, he screws up and disobeys the boss. Jesus could have said, get the hell out, you're expelled. Boy, what a screw up is that? You spent 3 years being told, love your enemy, and then you chop a guy's ear off? You're a failure. And the spiritual fails. What is the thorn in the flesh? Is it physical? Is it spiritual? Jesus tells Peter, oh, Peter, 1 minute he's like, that you're the Christ. You're the Holy One of God. Oh, yeah, you the best, dude. Get a piece of the rock. And the next minute he goes, he's called Satan. I mean, that's pretty heavy when the Son of God tells you you're acting as Satan. Get thee behind me, Satan. I mean, this is like not small. It's not like your ex-wife or ex-husband calling you Satan. The spiritual master calls you the devil. That's like, that's like on a scale of 1 to 10 on the spiritual fails. That's like an 11. Paul gets thrown off his horse, which is his arrogance, his comfort at who he thinks he is, his knowledge, his learning. That's what it means when it says gets thrown off his horse. That's what it means to say be thrown off his horse. He's thrown off of his sense of, because I don't do that now, but I did in the past ride horses in Manhattan and Brooklyn, actually. Kensington stables, still running around and riding horses. And, that's quite powerful to be on top of 1,500 pounds of muscle, to get thrown off of your muscle like that, but spiritually. Peter sinks while walking on water. Peter and Paul have in common the love of Jesus. They both come around to preaching to the Gentiles. They both come around. But the single biggest thing they have in common is their spectacular weaknesses, and failures. And that's why the epistle to the Romans today has so much engagement, because the epistle to the Romans today talks about weaknesses and failings and sufferings. Now, if we look, though, at first at the gospel read is in Matthew. I think, or it feels to me like it's 30 years after someone dies, and you're sitting in a room with people saying, what do you remember of what he said? What do you remember of what he said? Which is like the Phaedo, the Phaedo. Were you there on the day that Socrates was executed? Yes, I was there with the others in the prison. Well, tell me about it. What did Socrates say? And so, because the collection of things that are said about the eye being a lamp of the body, and you're either dark or light. Again, also like Plato, through the eye, beauty attains the soul. Through the eye, beauty attains the soul. By the way, biologically, the retinal cells are the only cells in the heart and in the eye that have a unique type of cell that is depolarizing, which means activated. Even in the quote unquote, the resting state is activated, which is called dark current. It means that in the dark, your retina is depolarizing because it's searching for the light.
Mm.
That's the biology of it. That's the biology of it. The biology of it is that they're called funny channels, sodium channels, which are depolarizing, trying to find the light. And the issue about, this unmatched wisdom literature. By the way, it doesn't say that it's bad to have money. It says to serve money. What's it called in the Greek? Philargia, love of money. But it means to serve money is not mean that it's not. But he didn't say have money serve you and your community. So that's the other point. What shall it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? He didn't say what shall it profit a man to gain the whole world and keep his soul. Like there's nothing wrong with privilege if you're using your privilege to take care of people. So the issue is not the money, the issue is the serving money. And so the unmatched wisdom literature about don't worry about your life. That's why the last line in Catholic Mass is the farewell. Is the priest says, "Go in peace. May you be freed from all anxiety.
Mm.
May you be free from all anxiety. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord." In
Mm.
Catholic Mass. And it always impressed me that you need the priest as the representative of God to order you to not be worried, to not be anxious, because it's worry is like a cloudy day that you can't see the sunshine. In the Orthodox perspective, it's demonic attack, evil thoughts, and these set of things about clothing or food or money and worry and anxiety, and that you are the flower of God's universe. That's what we are. We're like the flower of God's universe, the lilies of the field. Thank you, Sidney Poitier. Okay. So I'm going to finish by looking at this piece with Romans. And so the epistle to the Romans is unique because Paul is writing to a place he's never been. He usually writes to places that he's been and, like, what's up, guys? Even if it's good or you stupid Galatians. He's writing to people he met, and he's writing to be in contact with them at a time. I just recently studied what was the average length of a letter in the ancient world, and it was a lot shorter than his. When the postage is like, yeah, what is that? $75 postage stamp. Yeah. And so it's a lecture. It's he's writing to a church he's never seen. He's writing to people he's not met. We don't know who started the church in Rome. It's kind of it's not got the sort of love parts of Corinthians, and it doesn't have the anger. So he writes the letter in 55 AD. He's been preaching for 20 years. He's still got another 6 to 10 years to go, depending on when you think he's beheaded. But he doesn't write in it about the kingdom of God. He doesn't write about resurrection, ascension. He doesn't write about communion. He talks about being justified. Justified. Well, justification is a bad word for some people. We used to make jokes like that when I was with people in school. We used to tell them what they're wrong about something, and you're like, "Oh, wow, we should call you on your phone number 1-800 self-justification." And so, but the thing is, the word justified here in the Greek, dikaio, dikaio, okay, delta, iota, kappa, alpha, iota, okay, it ends with ninth omega, to put someone in a proper relationship, dikaio, to put someone in a proper relationship with another. Oh, I think that's more fitting, isn't it? Because justified is, MC can't touch this. Boom, 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 boom. I'm justified. But to put someone in a proper relationship, referring to God's relationship to humankind, a proper legal or moral relationship. And so when we are justified through faith, we're now in a proper relationship with divinity. And I think that that's a more satisfying way to look at that line rather than, I'm great, I'm doing fine, can't be criticized, but I want to be, because I think that's what, if we're spiritual seekers, we want to be in a proper relationship with divinity, the proper ethical, legal, moral, but the proper relationship. And so when we're justified, that it says through faith, though, not through Jewish law. Jesus is the door to be in a proper relation to divinity and not just Jewish laws. So we gain access, and the phrase in the second line of this in Romans 5, boasting, through whom we have gained access by faith into this grace in which we now stand, and we boast in the glory of God. That's always been an odd term for me as well, because of the concept of, like, yo, dude, I thought we were supposed to be free from the sort of intellectual and emotional vanity of boasting. If I want that, I can go to, like, World Wrestling Federation, like, hey, World Wrestling Federation, or other people, that the constant, endless boasting of our hyperbolic social media. But the way I read it is that it's the opposite of shameful. What are we boasting about? and it says about the next line, not being ashamed. And ashamed is not embarrassed. Ashamed means to have a certain remorse at having failed, like denying Jesus, like Peter did. Shame. So not being able to be put to shame because the love of God is inexhaustible. Boast in this sense means to have confidence. To have confidence. Not that the outer man is puffed up by boasting, which I guess we don't have a really good word for that in English. We don't have really a good equivalent for that, do we? Okay, to that, okay. Boasting. Couchami, couchami also could be translated as to rejoice or to glory in. To rejoice or to glory. And so what I can do is you can put things in the okay, but to rejoice or glory in the love of God. And I think that that's a really cool thing and a different way to say it than to say exactly to boast. Here, we put this in the chat. There's couchama. Yeah. And so that I'd like that to rejoice and have glory in. Now, standing in grace. Well, standing in grace. And now, then which we now stand into grace in which we stand. I'm standing in grace. I'm not just getting like a little slight tan. I'm standing in grace. I don't experience that much. That I'm so immersed that I'm actually standing in it. Do you really believe that? I don't most of the time. I don't experience myself as standing in grace. I'm not even the slang reference. Oops, you really stepped in it. If you stand in it, the glory, doxa, glory, glory. Glory also translates as splendor, brilliance, from the meaning of the awesome light that radiates from God's presence and is associated with his acts of power. Ooh, the awesome light that radiates. So we're going to stand in the awesome light that radiates from God's presence and is associated with his acts of power. Ooh, that is fantastic. And finally, our cosmic syllogism. Syllogism from logic, right? A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C, a syllogism. So we have suffering produces perseverance, perseverance equals character, character equals hope, therefore suffering equals hope. Suffering equals character, this syllogism. So we have glory to perseverance, to character, to hope. Therefore, I am content with weakness in Corinthians. Therefore, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities for the sake of Christ. For whenever I am weak, I am strong. The reference in the Corinthians. Wow. Because one of the things that always struck me about Romans is that he's headed towards the navel of the world, the aortic valve of the world. And truly, all roads lead to Rome. In the same way, in the 19th century, when the telegraph came to England, all the telegraph poles, the side had one side of it where the lines, when it had above ground lines for the telegraph, you could tell which direction London was because the boards on one side of it for the telegraph poles all aimed towards London and the whole country. And rejoicing in suffering because it's not meaningless. Viktor Frankl Suffering does not destroy a person.
Mhm.
Meaningless suffering destroys a person. And so our suffering is not meaningless. Suffering and perseverance, hope. God's love has been poured out into our hearts. Poured out. That's quite an image. Pouring it out. Like in Joel, the prophet Joel, I will pour out my spirit on all people. I will pour out my spirit on all people. It's the solemnity of Peter and Paul. And they are visible to us 2,000 years later, not just because of their virtues and strengths, but because of embracing their weaknesses.
Mhm.
They didn't have to agree, and we have been told on purpose, not by accident, that they didn't agree, but they still had common love. And if we embrace useful suffering and have the emotional endurance, Aristotle says the chief or greatest part of courage is endurance. The chief part of courage is endurance. That glory, all of this glory in the sense of splendor and brilliance and the awesome light that radiates from God's presence. I'd like some of that. Excuse me, can I have a double? Can I have a liter of the awesome light of God and God's presence? Thank you very much. And I will suffer to pay the bill. And let's celebrate our weaknesses and all of our mistakes if we persist. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.